Are you muting us?
I'll mute you all, yeah.
Oh, good.
If only I could do that at the beginning of an orchestra rehearsal, you know, just put everybody on mute.
Okay, well, I think we'll start then. So it's lovely to have the chance to be part of this discussion. So I know that Jackie and Rebecca have been talking for quite a while informally about leadership at the Podium and at the Bimah. And so this meeting is the upshot of their informal conversations. And we thought it would be very interesting to have a chance for them to talk about their leadership roles in the field of music, Jackie with Chazan and Rebecca with conducting, and to hear them talk about the similarities and the differences in their roles, and also maybe to talk a bit about the fact that this is both of them work in areas which have traditionally been areas where men have really dominated and women haven't particularly been part of it. So we thought that this would be, you know, a nice opportunity to talk.
It's a good crowd.
And it's a lovely crowd, yes. And I'm going to say just a teeny tiny bit about Jackie and about Rebecca, because I know that you know them very, very well. But they've got their, you know, they've got their sort of synagogue and friendly hats on. So it's sometimes in the community in which you live, you just don't know quite how marvelous and fantastic the people are who you see normally on a Shabbat morning. I mean, not at the moment, obviously, but so I am just going to give you a little blast of their biographies because I just think it's very nice to know. So first of all, Jackie was the first woman in the UK to be ordained as a Chazan. She's a founder of Kol Nefesh and also a founder of Masorti Judaism. And because it's not enough to organize and to found two organizations, Jackie's also a founder of EGIL, the European Academy of Jewish Liturgy, which provides competent lay individuals and groups with dedicated professional coaching and mentoring in leadership of Jewish prayer. So that's just a little snapshot of Jackie. Loads more to talk about there. And Rebecca is the chief conductor of Sweden's Uppsala Chamber Orchestra. She's also the associate conductor of the South Bank Sinfonia and the director of the orchestras at Royal Holloway University. She's conducted extensively with many orchestras in the UK and all over the world. And just a little taste, the BBC Symphony, the BBC Orchestra of Wales and the LPO, Houston Symphony Orchestra and the Jerusalem Symphony Orchestra, which I would love to hear about, having an inside experience of that as well. And so Rebecca's also known for her work with young musicians and for championing the music of neglected female composers. So that is just like a sort of little teeny tiny tip of the iceberg of these wonderful women. And what I think the plan is that we'll do around 50 minutes of talk. And I think the idea is I'll kick off with a few questions and then we'll sort of just see where it goes. Then after 50 minutes to an hour, then there'll be a period for you to have questions as well. So if things spring to mind, then, you know, please do write them down, and then that would be lovely to hear about it afterwards. So I think the idea is that we'll just, you know, I'll sort of throw out a question or a sort of prompt, and then we'll just see where we go with it. Does that, Jackie, Rebecca, does that sound all right to you?
Absolutely. But Susanna, I'd just like to make one little request, and that you spoke about us, and I think I'd like to hear a little bit about you so that
okay
would know that too, please.
Okay, very good.
Shira laughing.
Okay, so
that's the beauty of Zoom, isn't it? Wonderful. Go on.
So I'll just say a little bit. So I was asked to facilitate this, so sort of having half a foot in both camps. So so my musical foot is very much more robust than my religious one. My religious one is I am attached by marriage to Joel, who we all know and love in different capacities. So that's my Jewish foot, and my musical foot is I'm a bassoonist. I've got 20 years of professional experience on the inside. So that's very different from where Rebecca's standing, and I've moved a little bit out of that. Also, all of this is sort of within the realm of music. I've worked as a music therapist, and I've moved more into musicians' well-being with a particular interest in how musicians can help themselves to feel better on stage and overcome performance anxiety. So that's me as well. So that's why I'm here, because, you know, a little bit, I certainly live in the world of music, and so I know what it's like to be in an orchestra, and I know what it's like to be in a kahila, to be in part of a praying community as well. So that's kind of my brief for why I'm involved. And it's nothing to do with Joel at all, obviously. Okay. So first, so I thought we'd just kick off with something very, very, very open, just so that we can hear from you what you think that your role is. So either Jackie or Rebecca, whoever wants to start, what do you see is the role of a conductor or a cantor? Jackie, I'll ask you to start, if that's all right.
Okay.
Having
The role.
Yeah.
The role really is, it's certainly a leadership role, but it's not a leadership role as I am out there in front of everybody, although the Chazan is out there, or maybe within the body of which is better. But the role is to, as far as I'm concerned, is to enable the kahila, the people who you're with, to enter their own experience of tefillah, of prayer. That's really the objective, is to reach the soul of each person. It's a very difficult thing to do, because everybody is so individual, with individual needs and yearnings, and a complete world of emotions in one room, even in a small community at any given time. And the role of the Chazan is to hold the souls and to embrace them, and yes, to enable them to enter the experience of tefillah through almost unquantifiable things. Sound, of course, because, you know, we want everybody to engage in making their own sound. And sound is the kind of sense, rather even more than a visual sense of the atmosphere and the environment. It's the atmosphere of sound that the Chazan is engaged with. I guess that's it, sort of. There's loads more, but.
Yeah, so the role of a conductor, the word I always use is enable, and Jackie's used it twice already, which is that my role is to enable the people in front of me to do their jobs, and to get them to communicate with each other, to encourage them to trust each other, to lead each other, and it's also a very distinct collection of individuals, highly trained individuals who all have their own opinions about how the music should go, not unlike a kahila. You know, everybody has the opinions about how things should go, but they've all come highly trained, and then somehow we have to, as a conductor, we have to have this bigger vision of the piece, that we're the only ones that don't make any sound up there. Everybody else is busy making sound, and actually we're the silent ones, and so we're the ones that are completely 100% dedicated to listening. We're the chief listeners. So my job is also to listen and to sort of guide the listening of the orchestra. And then when we're performing for actual people, if that ever happens again, that it's almost a sort of guided listening to the audience at times as well. So there's two different roles. I think one is what you do with the orchestra in a rehearsal, and then there's another dimension when you have an audience, which is somewhat different to you know, Jackie's description of her role, where we don't really have the audience engaged in that capacity. So yeah, but my role is to enable.
Yeah, so we both have that thing, but it's very interesting when we're talking about audience, because a congregation is in some congregations, I mean, you know, the community is an audience, because particularly in choral congregations where you have a professional choir, even though not an amateur choir, but they have a conductor who is conducting seriously a very beautiful performance of a composed piece. Everything is notated. And that becomes a performance, because it is by its very essence a performance, and the congregation is catching the beauty of the performance as a religious experience. So that's the aim. But Dudley would know better than anybody, I think, that what this is all about. But from the perspective of a shul that doesn't have a choir, the congregation is the body you're working with, if you know what I mean. So we could say the congregation is like orchestra plus audience together in a way. But the ultimate thing is, I always think of it as a triangle, like a three-way thing, because the Chazan is the text, right? The role of the Chazan is actually to take themselves out of the equation completely once they're engaged, because they are the liturgical text, and the way the text is communicated together with the congregation, that's the second dimension. And of course the third dimension is God. And it's unquantifiable. It's unquantifiable, and you never know from one person to the next what the experience of that person is. But you can only know yourself. So I have my own experiences of moments. I spoke about this before, about life being a series of moments, and I think it's those moments that are so beyond anything we can describe, in a sense, that might be maybe described as something beyond oneself, that might be relating to a God experience for people. But, you know, it's very personal as well.
Well, it's the same. It's the same with an audience. I mean, I think you never know what the person next to you in an audience is thinking about the performance that's happening in front of you, and you're having this experience. You may be loving what's going on stage, and the person next to you might have hated it, and you only know that when you get to the interval and you say, "Oh, wasn't that marvelous?" And they say, "No, it was awful." You know, so but you know, I guess people here don't do that. People in America do that, but but yeah, it is that really individual experience that we're all having as audience members, and unquantifiable as well. You know, we always say that music sort of takes off where words leave us, and oftentimes you can't describe, just like trying to describe a feeling. You know, you can't describe some moment of music that really moved us. But it's, you know, that's always my aim, is that if somehow people ask me sort of what do I want out of a performance, what's my goal? And my goal is always that if I've transported somebody in the audience, hopefully more than one person, if I've transported them somewhere else other from where they, just for a couple of hours, if I've taken them somewhere else, I think I've done my job.
So interesting, because music is a world on its own, a language on its own. And so, you know, people say, well, you know, I need to have a professional performance in shul as such. So there are many people who feel very cheated out of something if there isn't a choir there to give that kind of musical thing. It's very interesting because being a music lover, I will go to a concert and cry my way through a concert because the music is exquisite and performed beautifully. Is that the same experience as being in shul? And the answer has to be no. So where is this unquantifiable thing that, and I can only for myself say it's because I'm doing it in a way, you know, the depth of one's Jewish soul is yearning for a Jewish, the kind of, how can I put it? It's being within thousands of years of peoplehood that has brought me to where I am in this. So it's very interesting because it's a different experience, and I'm a great music lover. As I say, you know, I'll cry my way through concerts. I do. So, you know, and yet the music in the shul that I have the privilege really of holding and communicating is it's raw. It's that sort of the wrench of the soul. It's that rawness. It's getting to the kishkas, you know. I mean, well, you know, this is, I have to use Jewish language because that's the nature of what it is. It's how do you get deep into this deep Jewishness that's going to kind of get to the people, you know, if they want it. Not everybody will like it. I don't know, you know, I can only speak for myself. But so I think there's that's the difference. And yet, I don't know. I mean, look, we sing various little things to bits of Mendelssohn, and you know, Vanachnu Navarech, yeah, that's Mendelssohn. So, you know, go quantify it all. It's very interesting.
Well, we're continually searching on stage as well, and may that search never end, because I think that there's so much in music education about that bothers me, and one thing is that there's so much in it about getting it right.
Yeah.
Getting so much music right, and you know, getting it in tune and getting it and doing it 20 times until you can do it 20 times at home, then maybe you'll be able to do it once on stage. And there's so much about getting it right, but actually, and you do have to get it right, of course, because you know, the system is set up like that you're set up with exams, and then you have to get it right because, and in orchestra you have to get it right because 20 people around you are getting it right as well. But there's so much more than that. There's so much that we're searching for that's much deeper, and much beyond what's on the page. And there's so many. You know, we're given the dots on the page, just like we're given a text, but a different production of Shakespeare, you know, from one to the other can sound completely different and give a completely different, even though they're the same words. So it's the same concept that we're looking for something underneath and deeper. And that's what I feel also is a primary sort of role of the conductor, is at least on that day. It doesn't have to be the definitive version of this piece. It just happens to be what I'm convinced of on that day, that I have to convince all those other people that this is the way we're going to do it. This is the tempo we're going to do it. There are all these decisions you have to make in terms of no, a little bit less here, a little bit more there, you know, a little salt over here, a little pepper, a little more horn, a little less flute, and it can sound completely different. So there's all these decisions you're sort of cooking. I always say that the text in front is like a recipe, and it's only realized through the chef. And you, each time you do it, you know the recipe a bit better, and you own it a little bit more, and you adjust things. And no, I don't want to cook this for 40 minutes. I only want to cook it for 30 minutes, and you know things a bit better. So, but it's that searching, that yearning, that wanting to get it better, even though you've played it really accurately. You want to get, as musicians, we never quite reach that perfection. I don't know what that is anyway, but it's not perfection in terms of everything being in place, but it's perfection in terms of getting it what we want in here to come out in our playing or in our orchestra. So there is a searching and a yearning there as well.
Oh yes, it's so interesting, Rebecca. You used the word recipe a couple of times actually. The word for recipe in Hebrew is nusach. Nusach hatfilah is the recipe we use in both in terms of text and also in terms of its musics, and I'll put that in the plural because that's what it is. And that's precisely what we have. We have the nusach, that it gives us the parameters in a way within which to work. And every time we're there, it's different. Every time, it doesn't matter if it's you've done the same thing weekday after weekday, Shabbos after Shabbos, using the same formula, the same recipe, but each experience is going to be different. It has to be, because it's about the human experience and that depth of yearning that we want to address.
Jackie,
interesting.
Jackie, I wonder whether you could say anything about getting it right, because you know, in the world of classical orchestral music, there is a sense of, like, there's a basic getting it right that there almost has to be. Have you got anything that you know, what's that like with Jewish music? From that
there
way?
are differences, Susanna. It's a good question, because I was thinking of it as we were talking before. In terms of if it's going to be a professional performance with notes like a choir, they have to get it right. Of course they do. As far as the Chazan is concerned and the congregation, they getting it in the same terms of getting notes right and getting words right, forget it. That'll fly out the window, because that's not what it's about. As far as the musical expressions from, you know, the real tradition, the davening traditions, the nusach hatfilah in musical terms, as far as that's concerned, there are absolutely clear parameters within which we work that pulls out down traditions from centuries. And so you have different musics, if you like, different traditions for different parts of the Shabbat morning service, and Mincha, and Mariv, and they've all got different modes and motifs and this, and depending on which, it's complex, it's not simple. Do we have to get it right? I think what I always teach my students, it's that what they do has to be appropriate. So they need to know their nusach, but they're not, the difference is they are not in performance in this sense, unless they're a professional choir or even an amateur choir. They're not in performance with notes, musical notation is a late thing. It's not as ancient as the musical traditions of religious texts. They're ancient, and it's an oral tradition. Oral and oral, it's ancient. And so the question of getting it, quote, right, unquote, is, I would say, it has to be appropriate rather than right. But congregations sing out of tune. Are we going to say to them, be quiet? No, we want them to sing. And the most amazing thing is that once you've got a congregation singing at the tops of their voices, you don't hear the ones that are out of tune. You don't hear them, because often they find that they're actually singing in tune, whatever that might be, because we're dealing with Western kind of expressions of music. And it's fascinating. But no, it's a different thing. Every time I think about getting it right, it makes my stomach churn remembering my piano exams.
Yes, this is what irritates me. Is so many people have these stories about bad experiences of not getting it right. So I mean, the thing is that within any framework. So you're talking about like having a box and having certain parameters, having rules, not necessarily getting it right. And there's the same thing with us. We've got certain rules about what the music that we play. Susanna will know this in terms of the way we play kind of classical, from 18th century music, as opposed to the way we would play 19th century music. There's sort of different rules. And as long as you have those rules, then within that box, you've got lots of freedom. But without the box, you don't have any freedom, because then you don't know which end is up. So as long as we have a set of sort of a box that we can think within, then there's the creativity that's within. I think it's something similar as what you have to get. It has to be appropriate. I mean, there is something you've got to get right in terms of the words and maybe pronounce it well enough so that we can understand and things like that. But beyond that, it was interesting when you said, this isn't a performance. I started thinking, what is a performance? Why do we do this? Why do we care whether, I mean, of course, an orchestra has to be together, because otherwise you don't get everything that's supposed to line up vertically. It's supposed to come together. There's harmony and things that line up vertically, so that we can't have total freedom and everybody do whatever they like. I mean, I suppose it's the same within a kila. Everybody has to sort of sing roughly together, although there's a lot more freedom. But I'm thinking, why is it that performances have to be this perfection, this thing that, wouldn't audiences love it if it weren't? But we've come to expect that because of CDs and everything. We've come to expect CD quality on stage all the time. Danny and I were just talking about this in terms of just the audience expectation. And people used to hit, you think about Rubinstein and all of his performances, full of wrong notes, but it didn't matter, because it was the neshuma, the poetry that he was speaking on stage spoke far beyond that. So I think, music has come too far in terms of they expect us to be superhuman on stage, and actually we need to be more human.
I think I'm curious to hear is, both for Rebecca and Jackie, what would you describe as a really good either concert or tefillah? What is a really good one?
Gosh. The one that I'm doing at the moment. No, I mean that. People also ask me what's my favorite piece of music, and I say it has to be what I'm studying at the moment. I have to own it. So it's like I have to make that performance. For me, a great performance is one that just we have those moments where just everybody, what Jackie was talking about in terms of, I don't know what's at the top of our triangle, but there's definitely a top of the triangle that we're aiming for, whether it's the audience for some people or whether it is some sort of, God on, that people are playing to, or whether we're playing to the composer or whatever. There is that. And when there's those moments of total unity and commitment that we sort of transcend, if it has those moments in it, I would quantify it as one that goes down in my history book.
Something, I share that, because for me, it is the moments, those moments that are not quantifiable, those moments of magic where you feel it, it's tangible. that the congregation are so there with you, and it's you can't describe that. And the moment I often think it's in the moments of silence when you've finished something. That's where it is.
Yes, and that is, you know, the silences in music are, they're the most powerful parts. Both the silence before something begins, that's a very special, almost, I consider it almost a religious moment, that just when you wait for the audience to just everything go quiet. But also the ones in between. I mean, actually for a conductor, the silences are the most terrifying, because they're the moments when you have to make decisions, and they're the moments actually when you have to move in preparation for what's happening next, when it's a holy moment, and you have to break it and move on. And it's just like, you know, the doorways that Rabbi Joel always talks to us about in terms of the dangerous doorways that we talk about every year at the high holidays. And we have to make decisions and walk through doorways, and those are the rests for me, are those doorways. And absolutely the silence at the end. There's nothing worse than the guy in the back sort of bravo, you know, coming in right when you're just enjoying that moment that's just happened, and someone's, yeah.
Yes. And I think we shouldn't be frightened. Sorry, Susanna.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think there's something about the quality of the medium of the music itself, which facilitates some kind of transcendental experience. But the music itself, you know, I think Rebecca, I would say at the top of our triangle. I mean, I kind of agree in a way that, you know, you said something about the composer, but you know, the composer's wishes, but there's something about, you know, really the music itself, like trying to get the most out of the music itself, which leads us into some sort of, you know, into an experience of awe. And Joel and I, sometimes when we talk about, you know, the comparable experiences of something transcendental that can happen through prayer and that can happen in an orchestra. And, you know, both of you are in positions where you can, well, I mean, from my perspective, someone who doesn't lead, who participates, that you're in a position where you can enable that. Now, that's my position as someone who participates. What do you think about that?
Yes, I mean, we that's our job. That's our job. I think is the enablement and the empowerment of the people. It's not about us. It's you know, we come with a passion and a yeah, it's that we come with a passion for what we do, and I feel that. I've been to Rebecca's concerts and I've sat behind her as she's conducting the orchestra, and she is magnificent, and I watch them, you know, and it's beautiful, and they're just totally with her. There are moments in Shul where I've had that experience of enabling, hopefully enabling people to enter something beyond themselves, you know, through the experience. We have, it's so interesting because the congregation is composed of very different people, and you know, some people are very knowledgeable of the liturgy, some people are not, and find the Hebrew difficult, and that doesn't matter one iota, because you know, we want them to engage in just even hum along, you know. In fact, the humming, the buzz, the drone underneath, to me gives that wonderful kind of sound base on which to build this experience. So we want the people who are not so, you know, machmir, if you like, about every word and every you know, getting the right emphasis on the right syllable and all that stuff. Yeah, we want that. Just let it be. Just let yourself just go with it. Just go with it. You know, close your eyes and just feel. So it's creating an environment, if you like. But of course, that's helped along by this funny, quirky place where we Devon, and that room, which you can sing in it's like singing in the bath with the echo, you know, it's wonderful. Wonderful for this purpose. May not be wonderful for other purposes, but as far as I'm concerned, if we didn't have that, it may not even be enabled to sort of produce the experience that we have. I don't know, but my guess is that the acoustic is vital for that.
Mm.
What do you think, Rebecca, with that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, the acoustic anywhere in music can change things so dramatically in terms of the environment of the room and the attitude of the players. You know, if they can't hear each other, suddenly they become very, if they're in a very dry space, or they're in a very, very resonant space as well, can also be too much so. If they can't hear each other, all of a sudden they get very insecure, and they can get very defensive. You know, all of a sudden they can't hear each other. They feel suddenly like they can only hear themselves. They're not used to that. And suddenly it takes so little in a group like that to actually make everybody just, you know, the fear comes out. There's an underlying, I mean, maybe Susanna will correct me if she thinks this is not correct, but almost every musician that I've spoken to in my years of experience, there is an underlying fear. There's an underlying feeling of fear playing in an orchestra. Even if you've been doing it for many, many years, there's fear of being sort of making mistakes in front of your colleagues. There's fear of being singled out. There's fear of not being invited back. There's fear of not being good enough to be sitting there. There's all this kind of stuff underneath that is so sad for me to think that there's all this fear underneath. And it doesn't take very much for something to just go wrong in a rehearsal, and suddenly there's a really tense atmosphere underneath. And I don't know how I got into that, but you talked about acoustic, and it's just interesting that there's so a lot. I guess a lot of what if I'm understanding that when I'm coming into a room, I'm consciously and unconsciously thinking of continually trying to allay that fear, and continually trying to make people feel like it's a place that, I don't mind if musicians ask me questions or say things during rehearsal. Some people, I don't want that silent environment. I want a collaborative, collegial kind of teamwork environment where we can make decisions together. And I don't make all the decisions, you know. I'm very happy to have that. So I'm continually thinking that it's so difficult to sit in an orchestra if you've been practicing this instrument since you were 4 or whatever, and then suddenly you have to come and do what everybody else does, and you have to do what she says on the podium, all of that. So there's that element of my feeling of responsibility to try to get them not to be so afraid.
I'd like to come in here and just say, you know, it's really interesting when you think traditionally, if you just picture what a conductor has traditionally been and what a chazan has traditionally been, they've been these sort of lone figures, male, standing on a podium, a stage, also for chazanut, dominating really. So you know, then we come back to this thing of you both have roles of leadership in a role that has traditionally been very male. And I'm just wondering, you know, hearing all this enabling as women doing that, you know, what's that like? Do you feel that you're carving out new territory, or have there been other people who've modeled that for you?
No. Where did I get that from? I don't know. I think I've just I've learned, I don't know, that I guess that's just, it's my personality. And I never started thinking about whether it was a gender-based style of leadership until I started talking about leadership, I suppose. I mean, I became a conductor because I wanted to make music with other people. I didn't like practicing by myself. Danny loves it. Danny loves being in the practice room by himself, and that's great. It's wonderful to see that he thrives in that. I mean, he loves chamber music as well, but I got on stage because I wanted to make music with other people. So I'm continually just thankful to be on stage with other people and other human beings and sort of exchanging ideas. And I think it kind of came out of that. But no, I don't think I had a sort of role model. My first conducting teacher is a very, very strong-minded French Canadian pint-size thing with huge energy, who was teaching at the university where my mom's a professor in California. And no, she wasn't collegial at all. She was, let's go, the my way or the highway. And, but I mean, she did it in a friendly, charming, she's so cute, everybody sort of took everything that she said. It was great. But she was, everything has to be this way. And this is the tempo. That's it. No arguments. So yeah, it was, maybe that was almost a negative role model. I mean, Jackie can talk to you about negative role models, the anti-role model, right, Jackie?
Oh my goodness, role models for, there were never any women doing what I do. My real role model when I was about 15 or 16 was sitting with my mum in Shul one Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, where I lived in Shul, by the way, when I was a kid. I got it by osmosis right from birth, really. And but we had a chazan, and he was a big chazan with a big voice, and look at my voice, and aren't I wonderful, and I'm going to give a concert doing this opera and this and that. Kol hakavod, that was him. He was the mole as well. That I won't do. Anyway, he so 2 years running, and I was only 16 or something like that, 15, sat with my mum in the ladies' gallery, because Orthodox shul, and we had a visiting student chazan from Jews College called Martin Cooper. And he was a kid. I mean, he was about 20, 21 or something. He didn't know anybody in the community. Nobody knew him. He just came because he was asked to lead the service for an overflow. Well, when he stood there with a voice that was simple. It was, of course, in tune, but very simple, with no chazonische drays that I call, he just gave the nusach as it was. But what I caught from him was, I caught his kavana, I caught his sincerity and his devotion to what he was doing. And he stood there, and I can still hear in my old ear the sound of this man who is now about 86, I think. He's now living in America, and I can still hear his young voice singing the Kedusha for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I can still hear him, and that never left me, never. So that was really, I would say, if there's going to be an influencer or a role model, it was him. And later on, once I decided to become a chazan, I had to find him to say thank you. He didn't know who I was. And I searched the world. It took a long time, and I did find him in the end. And the most incredible coincidence was that he'd gone to America, and he didn't want to be a chazan or a rabbi. He wanted to be an educator. So for years, he headed one of the big Solomon Schechter day schools. And then when he retired, he decided to become a rabbi. And where did he study? At AJR, which is my alma mater. And so I found him, And he said to me, when you are ordained, he said, you have to have a Beit Din. He said, you're going to be a Chazan, so you have to have 3 Chazanim, or you can have a rabbi on your Beit Din as long as they're an alumnus of, or an alumna of AJR. And he said, I would be very honored if you would let me be part of your Beit Din. And in the end, he was the one who gave me smicha. How about that for a story?
It's a wonderful story. It's
Yeah.
a wonderful story.
It is. It's an amazing.
The sincerity that you talk about, I think that's really key for us, isn't it? I mean,
Absolutely. It has to be authentic, you know, it has.
when I've spoken to musicians, that's, you know, I've had all these sessions about what do I'm continually asking musicians, what do you want out of a conductor? What do you not want out of a conductor? Because I think it's really important as a leader to understand the people that you're leading and understand what they have to do. I mean, it's a little bit different than this is a sort of difference, is that I'm asking sometimes musicians to do something differently, which you wouldn't necessarily do in the role that you have. But and I have to understand what they have to do in order to do that. So I have to understand their job in order to know what I'm asking them to do. But they're always looking for authenticity in a conductor. They want sincerity. They don't want this puffed up. They've seen a lot of puffed up, you know, big guys, and they want the real deal. And one other thing that I wanted to say about the fear, actually, where I was going with that, and I sort of got off track in terms of the kind of fear atmosphere in the orchestra, is that actually they're looking to us for confidence. Because I know we talked about this, Jackie, and you're saying that we have to be the confident voice there for the people, because there may be people there who are confident. There may be people there who are feeling very insecure about where they came from. Maybe this is their first time in shul, or, you know, the first time at this shul, and we have to be confident for everybody. And that's really hard, actually, because even sometimes we feel insecure about what we're doing, and there's no room for that, is there?
So Rebecca, what would you do to try and help people feel more confident?
I think the more confident that I am, I just, you know, try to embrace everybody in the room. I try to make eye contact with as many people in the room as possible. So I'll try to maintain eye contact with the back of the second violins. I know that guy's been sitting back there for 45 years and he's bored, and, you know, try to get him to look up from his music is like my goal for that half of that rehearsal. Just try to get him to look up. But I try to engage as many people, eye contact, not putting them on the spot, but just, you know, and I guess my gestures tend to be quite, I'm always encouraging my conducting students to have gestures that are inviting, rather than, you know, play it. So that we conduct more like this, and that the gesture is that we're inviting them to play. We're inviting people to join us. So, and that's kind of developed over my 20 odd years of conducting. I think I used to be much more sort of here's the beat here, but actually I've developed, you know, much more of kind of embracing gestures. So I hope that helps people feel, and the orchestras say that they enjoy that. They enjoy the gesture that is kind of all embracing, so that it makes them feel included.
You develop your own style in the end. I think this is the experience that comes with doing it a lot. That, you know, you learn along the way, really, don't you? It's a sort of, it's.
Well, you don't come out fully formed as a conductor. I mean, this is the thing about being leaders, is when the first time that you lead, you have to lead in front of a whole bunch of people. You're leading in your living room. You know, my plants are very well educated, but, you know, because I talk to them all the time. But the first time that you actually conduct and you actually engage other people, you're in front of a whole bunch of people. You're on this first date with 80 people, you know, and you don't really get to try that out until you do it, and you're trying, and they, you know, you're trying it out, not in a very private setting. You have to make your mistakes sort of with them. in the right environment, I suppose, which sometimes there are environments that are accepting of mistakes, and sometimes there aren't. So
I wanted to ask actually that if you could say, both of you, a bit about how you prepare, so, and how that gives you confidence as well, but also not only how you prepare with the confidence aspect. I'm aware that we haven't yet talked about the text that you're both working off, and the text that you're working off is really, really important. So I throw that out to you to mull over. Who would like to jump in?
how do I prepare? It depends how much time I have. It really does, actually. I mean, if I have to prepare a score for tomorrow, I'm going to prepare very differently than if I'm preparing a score for next year. But I probably won't conduct something tomorrow that I'm not prepared to do. So for a conductor, it's learning every single line of the music, every single marking on the page, all the dots on top of the notes, next to the notes, all the text, and learning it line by line, and learning it how it lines up, learning how it's structured, the big structures, the smaller structures. I sing a lot, and I sort of because I think that's, for me, that's the way to get it inside of me, and that informs my gestures. So that, and then when I'm in front of the orchestra, if I can't find the right descriptor, I can always sing. And a song says 1,000 words, so that's, and I a big part of what I do is learning the context of the text. So learning about the composer, learning about the piece, reading things that he might have read or that she might have read, learning other pieces that they wrote so that this piece sits within a context of their output. So that's just the beginning. I could go on for the rest of the evening, but I think Jackie should say something.
Well, it's not dissimilar, because, we have, and the whole thing is about the text. The liturgy is exquisite poetry. And you have to dig deep, and it means different things at any given time, because a word can jump out suddenly at you. It's sort of, and then playing with the nusach. I mean, the nusach, you have to know the nusach, appropriate nuschaot, and you have to, but a lot of it, actually, I think, is spontaneous. It's not rehearsed stuff. I think within, because I feel that it's, I don't like the word prayer. I've said this a lot. Tefillah is an introspection. Even if you're singing out loud with a community, it's for the shliach tzibur, for the person who's leading, it's a very personal thing, and it has to be personal to me. I have to do what I'm doing. If I'm not doing what I'm doing hopefully with integrity, I mean, that's what it is, then how are the community going to catch what tefillah is? But at the same time, it's very difficult. I find it's an extraordinarily difficult job, because it's personal. And so, yes, I'm leading it, because as a person who has taken the joy and the privilege of learning this beautiful nusach, I'm the one who's helping, hopefully, people to enter that tefillah with me. But their tefillah will be very different. The preparation is only a kind of part of it, if you know what I mean. The preparation, because it's all about the experience and those moments, and they don't happen all the time, of course. If they happened all the time, you'd have nothing to compare them with.
You talked about spontaneity. It's interesting. I wonder whether you think, because a musical performance also has to be spontaneous, but yet we do have to it has to be practiced. has to be practiced. And I feel that I only can have the spontaneity if I've tried something 20 different ways.
Yeah.
If I've practiced it 20 different ways, and then I don't decide before I get on stage. Some things I do, but some things I don't decide. And because you have to leave room, but I think you can only be spontaneous if you, first of all, have the tools, right? You need the tools. And the preparation is one of those tools, I suppose. It's interesting you talk about words that jump out, because people often ask me, I mean, I don't actually read the score when it's sitting in front of me, because you got 20 lines of music at the same time. You're not actually reading the score. It's just there it's marked up and it's there for clues. And some conductors conduct from memory. And I get asked often, what do you think about that? Do you think conductors should conduct from memory? Or do you think they shouldn't? And I don't conduct from memory. I like to have the score there, because in the performance, always I will see something differently in the score, because I've got a different mindset. I know that we're not going to, and this is a difference. I know that we're not going to stop. In a rehearsal, as I'm conducting, I'm thinking, when am I going to stop? How long am I going to let the orchestra play before I stop and say a few things? And what am I going to say when they stop? But in a performance, the head is clear. And so things jump out at me. And interesting, you see a word, no matter how many times I've conducted Beethoven First Symphony, something jumps out at me every time I do it, and something looks different, something seems different, because it's different people, different smell, different thing for breakfast, different country, whatever it is, something will jump out. And I think that's something I've experienced as well.
What was the other question, Susanna, that you said?
About the text.
Yeah, the importance of the text. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we've spoken about that, I think.
Well, but what's interesting is that we're using an old text. We're both using very old texts, and we have to consider how much we adapt. So we have to consider, as musicians, are we trying to sound like we think we know it should have sounded then? We know from these treatises that were written, some of them are behind me. This is what they would have played it like then. Are we trying to sound like then? Or are we trying to actually embrace today and play it in the aesthetic of today? And I think there's probably some of both, because we hold this text quite, I would use this word wholly, not in all seriousness. The musicians hold the score as a holy piece of text. But yet you can't play, there's certain things you can't play now the way they did 50 years ago. If you played Beethoven or Bach the way they did 50 years ago, it's very much out of style. It's sort of seen as, passé and all of that. So there is an element of, do we play it on, old instruments? Do we play in an old style on new instruments? There's a conductor, I think it was Colin Davis, who used to say, I don't really mind about the instrument. What I care about is the person sitting behind the instrument and their knowledge and their approach. So anyway, it's interesting to think of taking these really old texts and reciting and balancing tradition with relevance. Something we think about all the time.
I think it's exactly the same, really, in Shaw, because who knows what it sounded like, even 100 years ago. We don't know, and why would we want to replicate? That was their experience. We have, this is about our moments, and as we're living these moments all the time. And it's like being in the present, and that's the experience. And people often say, we can bring in this tune and that tune so that people know the tune and they like it, and we'll bring that in. And some people don't like that. They don't want new tunes because they don't know them, and they only want their old tunes. And then so you bring in a new tune, and the new tune becomes an old tune after 10 years. And they think that's Torah Misinai, we've had that tune forever. And of course, it was only composed 20 years ago. So it's really, it's what we experience, and how there's a wonderful old song. No, it's not so old. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. And I think that's the key to it, to be honest. And who knows? There's no such thing as sort of getting it right. It's just doing it. It's the experience. It's the moment, I think.
So what I would say, I think what sounds very interesting is it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. But all of that is based on the text. The text is the foundation stone of it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. So I mean, I always think that's food for thought, really, with you know, with such a live and vibrant thing, that it's underwritten, like its foundation stone is something which is solid. You know,
Yes.
it's, I mean, you can always argue about what the text is, but you know, it is built on text.
I'm always asking myself, what is the music? Is the music the music isn't the thing in front of us. You know, both what we're talking about here and the score, it's only comes alive when people play it or people sing it. It's not, it's just ink on paper until it's brought alive. So of course it's going to be unique, every experience, but it is also, it's interesting. You talk about this balancing these expectations. I mean, we have that all the time in music in terms of people coming to concerts when they think, you know, when they know the pieces, or even the musicians coming to the orchestra rehearsal, and they, you know, I have to often stand up in front of an orchestra, and some of those people have been in the orchestra longer than I've been alive, and they've played these pieces many more times than I have, and I have to balance that expectation with the person who's playing this piece for the first time, and then there's the audience in terms of them coming in and what they expect their Beethoven or their Brahms to sound like, and then there's, you know, the new music. Hopefully they won't run away for the new piece.
Other thing.
I can see that we've been going for just over an hour, and I just want to ask one more question before I open it up to everybody, and that is that both of you are engaged normally in things that are essentially social, and you know, that you do with other people, and now at the moment, because of social distancing, neither of you are able to do that thing. So I just, you know, I'm just curious, how are you managing that? How does that play out in your lives?
It's impossible. At first I mean, I actually haven't studied very many scores. It was painful to me to study scores at first during the first lockdown. It was also that I didn't know whether those concerts were going to happen, because I was preparing continually for things that then were going to be cancelled. But when I prepare, I'm preparing for those people that are in front of me. I visualize the people if I know them. If I don't, then I at least visualize some people that I think might be sitting there. So for me, it was really hard to just sit down and study scores without those people that I was preparing them for. I took to the internet and started something new that would get people together, because I was just going mad, and I didn't, and with my university, I didn't put together digital performances where everybody recorded individually and somebody marvelously tied them together digitally, because actually that made me so much more sad than it made it feel much more like isolated. So I just try to think of what's the essence that I can take, what's the essence that I can take out of, instead of all the other ingredients, just the really essence I can take out of the orchestral experience that we can still have. And I tried to create those experiences for those around me.
Yes, I found it to be incredibly painful, because to me, unless I'm davening on my own in my room, which I'm doing here in this room, I'm in shul, and there's no shul. And I know that many congregations have offered online services and things like that. I can't enter them. It's a very personal thing. I've said this before. I feel that when I know that as a Chazan, I'm standing with a community around me, and you know, this experience is going on. But the davening to me is very personal, and therefore to have the screens and this, it's like voyeurism, and I don't like watching people daven at all. I don't like it. And I don't like people watching me, and I don't mind them watching me but the face on. So people I've seen on Facebook or putting out services, and sometimes I scroll down and you know, good colleagues, and they've got their big faces on the screen davening, and I just can't go away. You know, I can't do this. This is, it's a very personal thing. I can't, maybe you can analyze it, Susanna, because it's a phenomenon that I never thought that it would ever happen, but it did. And so I can't, you know, I think the Zoom thing is fantastic for certain things. We've been teaching, my wonderful Yalda Chazan Rebling, who has taken over from me, Idril, has got the online team just incredible, and they're putting out these things, and we've got loads of people coming in to learn. That I don't think we'll ever take away now, because it enables the world. We've got people coming from all over the world. It's wonderful. And but by the same token, there are some things, and to me it's the davening, and I just can't. So, you know, it's how it is. So I look forward to getting back to shul, because I want to feel all the bodies there around me, you know what I mean.
Right. Should we just do like a closing thought and then open it up to questions, if that sounds all right? Closing thoughts.
I don't know what can say. I don't know what we can say after that.
Yes.
I think it's just, you know, our jobs are being surrounded by bodies. I mean, that's the absolute essence of it. And it has really, this whole situation has brought out the absolute core of why I do what I do, which is that it's because of humans and all of our wonders and imperfections in the same room, and that's the glory of what we do, and that's what everybody has, I think, realized. And I hope we go back to I hope we go forward to a place where nobody takes that for granted again. You know, the music industry is in tatters and is on edge of, you know, many organizations will not come back after this. And it's so terrifying to think about that, because actually I think music is really what we're going to need. And Nusach as well, to just heal us all from this experience.
Yes, it's about healing.
Let's hear if there's some questions out there. I'd love to hear people's, even just thoughts or comments or things that they don't agree with.
Shall we unmute everybody, and then I mean, we could just unmute and do it as a free-for-all, which I imagine will probably be best. I don't think we'll need to do hand signals or anything like that. So if you've got a question and you want to unmute, then fire away. Do we need mic for that? Yalda, fire away. Yes, please.
You can just unmute yourselves.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. What I learned is that times, Baruch Hashem, are changing, and that the role model you are creating of a leader is different from the times of Herbert Karajan or Lenny Bernstein. Fantastic musicians, but advise a totally different way to work with an orchestra. as Jackie's approach is different than the approach of a Chazan in the times of Moshe Koussevitzky. So times are changing, and for the good or for the bad, I don't want to judge, because everybody is living in his and her time, and it is now our time. And as the society changes, also our approach as leaders is changing. But I strongly believe that there is a huge difference between Bimah to standing in front of a kehillah as a chazan, and if I'm standing on the stage. So I do both. And for me, it's a totally different situation. And it's something I didn't hear tonight. So that's why I wanted to point out there are a lot of similarities, especially the moment of love, the moment of put away the ego and let go of, did I play this note right? And did I get this right? But the situation is so different. What is your experience?
It is, absolutely. I think I completely would respect that and agree with that. The experiences are completely different for me as well. I mean, I'm not leading services, but I think the experience, I don't think any of us were saying these are exactly the same. They have marked differences, but I think it's always lovely to talk about the ways that seemingly different cohorts or of people or different industries, that's the wrong word, but different situations, we can see similarities with this. What brings us together as people is to say, here, this is, that's a little bit like the way what I go through. So I think that there are marked differences, but I think there are also a lot of similarities. But thank you I'm sure you're not the only one around here probably thinking the same thing. But Jackie, what would you like to respond?
Yes, I there isn't any question about that, because I'm not a performer. I don't do, but I know there is a difference, a huge difference, really, between the performing arts and what we're trying to do in shul. It's just it is very different. Yalda knows only too well because she has her feet in both worlds.
Yalda, I just want to say thank you for that question and for your points, because for me, I think it's very interesting to talk about similarities. I'm just talking completely personally, that Joel and I, when we met, we came from very, very different worlds. I was completely immersed in music, and he was very, very immersed in the Jewish world. And as we carried on, for our years that we've been together, we found that there are some sort of like really basic points of contact that I don't think that we knew about at the beginning, or we weren't aware of. And so I think that that's probably where I'm coming from, certainly in my perspective, is the sort of the joy and the curiosity, the sort of, like finding that, because we, in many ways, we come from very different worlds, but we have many, many things in our very different worlds that meet. So I think that was, that certainly for me is why it's interesting having somebody who is a chazan talking to somebody who is a conductor, because of those points of similarity, which don't, for me at least, that they did not initially jump out. Mm-hmm. So I'm delighted if it seemed that we just talked about the similarities, because for me the differences seem very, very much greater in many ways.
Joel's got his hand up.
Yes, we'll let him speak.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Susanna. So in the Haredi world, in the ultra-Orthodox world, they would never have a dinner party where they invited friends round on a weekday. It would never occur to anyone. It would be a cultural faux pas. People wouldn't do that, because inviting people over for a meal only takes place in the context of a Sudat mitzvah. People would have people over for Shabbat, or for a Chag, or for a bar mitzvah, or for a wedding, or something like that. So to have friends over and to sit around and to secularize the notion of creating a shared meal is quite foreign to that world. Like whereas, you know, in our world, having a soiree, I'm going to invite people over on a Wednesday night or whatever it is, and we're going to cook nice food and we're going to have a nice conversation. We have a secularized notion of what it means to share food together, and that sits easily with us. And I'd like to push a little bit more on what the difference is between the secularized concert hall and the religious space of the synagogue, because at certain points it sounded like the search for the numinous is the same, like that there's something about the experience of transcendence and the numinous which is the same. In which case, like, what is a concert hall? I'm not quite sure I know what you're talking about yet. How could it not be religious to do what you do, Rebecca? And if it's not religious, then what is it? Is it like secular religion, or is it like a soiree? Is it like what is it? What is your job?
What is religious then?
Right, exactly. Maybe that's the question. Like, why we have clear boundaries between, or like we think we have clear boundaries between what constitutes religious and what constitutes not religious.
Yeah.
But what is like what like, you know, what is that secularity?
I mean, I agree with you. I was finding myself asking the same question in terms of when we were talking about performance, and, you know, what is it, and what it seems so ridiculous sometimes to think about it, what we do. And yeah, I think we have to define, what is religious, and why is that such a difficult word to use in this context? Because it seems like we shouldn't be saying that, because maybe that's reserved for certain things and off, you know, off base for other things, off limits. I don't know. I never thought about whether what I do on the podium is religious or not. I'm going to have to think about that. That's really, yeah, that's too difficult to contemplate right now on this forum. Jackie.
Well, it is very difficult. I think it's a matter of context more than anything else, because music is a religious experience, or it can be, no question about it. Music is an ethereal kind of experience that like none other. And if a person has the privilege of appreciating and loving music so much, it is a religious experience. As I say, I can, you know, this is I can't sort of, how can you take away, well, this is religious and this isn't religious, if you have this this overwhelming sense of love or of beauty or of something like that, that makes you connect with something outside of yourself, that can only be experienced in a moment of some kind of exquisite, I don't know, experience. Why wouldn't we consider that being something to do with what we might call God or something else? I don't see a difference in that. The difference is in context, and because with the religious experience comes a history of not just the music itself, but it's the history of the people. And as far as our people are concerned, it's a history of suffering, and it's a history of learning, and it's a history of all sorts of experiences that the people, it's a history of wandering and of different cultures that have brought it in, but it's Jewish. And so it's the context of it.
It's also the personal experience. As I'm thinking more about what you said, Joel, that for me, it's a very different personal experience for me. Being in shul is more about being introverted and looking inside, and it's a very rare moment in my life when I sort of get to kind of embrace those and bring things in, because I'm continually actually going out to the orchestra, and that's kind of my personality. That's most of the time in my life. I'm going out, I'm talking, I'm reaching out, I'm including people. I feel it's my job to kind of gather people and make them happy. But so for me, but that's just because that's what I've personally defined as my religious experience and my musical experience. I mean, maybe somebody would have exactly the opposite as an audience member, because they're there, that's their kind of they're absorbing that's their personal, really individual moment surrounded by other people, where I'm busy, doing this and and energizing everybody around. So it's interesting. And I also found myself really tied up when you asked that question in terms of, am I allowed to use that word? Is it right? Am I, because I'm quite, I don't consider myself very, very knowledgeable about the service. And, I have a certain amount of knowledge, but I'm always kind of quite insecure in what I know and what I don't know in shul. And on the podium, there's no question that, I know the world that I live in there. So, yeah, it's difficult. That's the kind of we're back to the getting it right, aren't we? Sort of, is this the right, is it the right word to use? But
maybe we can put that question back to Joel.
Absolutely.
No, I'm off duty tonight. Totally. Ask Susanna. Ask Susanna. Ask Susanna. I don't know. Because maybe if you're used to synagogue, then going to a concert becomes a religious experience, because you just sort of, you're experiencing the same things or seeking the same things or something like that. I don't know, but
well, if we're talking about a religious experience, it's something that lifts us out of ourself, right? Is that a definition that we could? No? Jackie's frowning at me.
Yalda is waving her hand.
Oh, Yalda's waving. Sorry, I can't see everybody.
Sorry that I'm raising my voice here once more. There are so many more people they also want to say something about it. I rather use the word spirituality, because for me it's bigger than just religious. Religious is for me bound to an institution, and spirituality is for my opinion, English is not my mother tongue, a broader experience. In shul, I'm the vessel to, so I see myself a vessel on the stage and also in shul. In the shul, I'm the vessel to get connected with the source of life. So to bring up the needs of people, the prayer of people, to help to raise the tefillah. And the moment I'm on the stage, I'm also a vessel. I'm the vessel to bring over the music experience from generations, with all the difficulties and all the beauties, even if it is Schubert or not non-Jewish material. Also, there is a hill of experiences. But here I try to connect the music to the people. And I can't say that the source of life isn't in this experience, but it is a different direction. So, and it has all to do with spirituality. It has all to do with the moment that I'm able to let the ego go. Oh, did I reach the right note? And did I do the things with the text right and whatever? That's something we all have, but just to let go and let the experience be experience how it is. And that's a miracle what happens there. And we are the vessel to make this miracle happen as on the stage and on the Bimah.
So I think, Yelda, I would add to that, as someone who sits in orchestras and is sometimes part of a kahila, is the experience for me that is common is the sense of awe, the sense that you're part of something that's bigger than you, that you can certainly have, you know, when you're sitting as a bassoonist in a massive, massive body of sound, this feeling that you're contributing towards something that is just much, much bigger than you are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's both of you very beautifully put. I think I agree with spirituality is much more comfortable. As soon as you said that word, it was more comfortable, Yalza, to think of that in that context. And Susanna, yes, something bigger than ourselves, definitely.
Susanna, can I ask a question?
Yes, far away.
Separate questions, if you don't mind. Rebecca, could I ask you, how you talked about conducting with people who've probably played a piece of music and 50, 100 times before. So I wondered, could you explain to us, how do you encourage them to accept your particular interpretation and make the final performance sound fresh? And Jackie, I wonder if I could ask you, can you think of a live recital that you've been to, it doesn't matter what type of music, where it completely blew you away and you came out feeling, I've actually been through a spiritual experience? So over to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, it's a great question, Nahum. Thank you. And it's something that's probably the thing that we think about most as musicians, is how do I make this fresh? How do I keep it fresh, especially if you're doing multiple performances? But I think that I have to be so convinced while I'm standing on the podium of that way that I'm doing it that day, which might be different the next day, but I have to be so completely convinced on the podium that I have to bring everybody with me, and I have to say in rehearsal sometimes, look, I'm sure, you know, I usually try to make light of it and use humor, and, you know, I'm sure you've played this many more times, many different ways. Let's try it this way today, just for today. I know I think I have to acknowledge the situation and sort of the elephant in the room. If I'm the youngest person in the room and, you know, everybody's been there and they have all of this experience, sometimes I will say it out loud, and sometimes it's an unspoken sort of thing in terms of just, you know, I believe it's going to go this way. I also have to have a lot of backup information. If somebody questions why I made the decisions that I'm making, I have to show that I've really thought through this, that it's not just a spontaneous decision that I decided to do at this tempo today, but that I've tried it 20 other tempos, and that this is the tempo it works because of this. So if somebody actually questions me in rehearsal and says, why did you choose the tempo that you did, or why are you choosing to do this, you know, at a different, heaven forbid we choose a different tempo than what's written on the page, you know, which often happens, that you have to be able to defend your interpretation, defend your decisions. So I think the more tools that I have and the more knowledge that I have, I'm able to defend the decisions that I make. But ultimately, I'm just one person, and I'm just today, and, you know, give it a try just today. And that's the same thing with performances and keeping them fresh. I just think it shouldn't necessarily be the same as yesterday. Sometimes you have a great dress rehearsal, and then in the performance you think, that went too well, you know, what am I going to do in the performance that's going to top that? And I have to remind myself, just do it fresh, just do it again, and let it you have to sort of distance yourself slightly. So that's my answer.
Nahum, can I come in there as someone who sits in the ranks?
Yes,
what makes it work as from a player? So what happens that makes an evening, you know, if you're playing the same program 5 times and you're tired and you've sat in a traffic jam and you're really annoyed and you're hungry, what would make you come to life and make a fresh performance is if the person who's in front finds something in the music or brings something in the music that you weren't particularly expecting, and they really go for it and it really works. So that requires a bit of a fresh look from them, and it requires everyone else to be cooperative and go with it. But it's often unexpected. You really can't predict when it's going to go well. So that is when it is nice to have someone standing up front who is actually going to do something. Sorry, little bit of cynicism from a player there, but that's when it's useful. Sorry, Rebecca. No,
the very first thing that I'll let Jackie answer in just a second. The very first thing that I always tell myself and all my conducting students is the orchestra can play without us. You do not need to be there. So make yourself relevant. Make yourself useful, because actually, if you didn't show up to work today, the rehearsal would go on.
Yeah.
Yes, I get services would happen as well without the Shliach Tzibur. So that's another thing, isn't it? But anyway, Nahum, your question about life-changing experiences through the musical performance, most definitely. Without any question at all, music has moved me beyond all sorts of things. And when Cheryl did my Desert Island Discs and I had my one little record, I mean, that Schubert, the second movement of the C major quintet, is, I can't, there are no words. There are no words, and certain performances do it more for me than others. And but yes, I mean, I just sit there and cry my way through it.
Thank you.
I see it's it's what 11:30 for me, so it's 9:30. So that's
Poor Susanna.
so I just couldn't quite work out what that was in English time, but that's our hour and a half slot. So if there are, I mean, that seems. Shall we finish now? We should say thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Jackie, Rebecca, fantastic to speak, could go on for hours. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Susanna.
Well, thank you very much, Susanna. It was wonderful to have this as a three-part. We talked about Jackie's triangle, and we had a little triangle of us, so an equilateral triangle. So thank you very much all for being here, and it's lovely to see everybody. So
thank you very, very much.
Take care. Stay safe, everybody.
Laila Tov.
Laila
Also good.